Hello, this is Sal. In today's video, we will be talking about configuring AAA authentication. Please, if you like this video, just subscribe to my channel and share the video and give me the thumb up. In the description of this video, you will see, you'll find there you can download the packet tracer for this lab and walk through documents. Now, AAA authentication. Authentication, authorization and accounting AAA is a system for tracking user activities on an IP-based network and controlling their access to network resources. AAA is often implemented as a dedicated server. This term is also referred to as the AAA protocol. The AAA server typically interacts with network access and gateway servers and with databases and directories containing user information. I already on this network I configured the interfaces for the routers and also the IP addresses, the configuration for the PCs, and also here for the radius server under the services tab, AAA. I also here, as you can see, the client name is this router 3 with the IP address of this interface, and the secret is radius. Also here I configured a username of admin 3 and the password of admin 3, and I'll remove this and configure a user as user 3 because I'll be using admin 3 as a local user on the router, user 3, and just simply hit add. And also going back to the TechHack server, also for the IP address of 192.168.2.2/24 subnet mask, this is the gateway for it. Under the services tab under AAA, also I will change this here and remove it and use user 2 and password user 2, add. I will explain later why I did this. Here on the router 1, I already configured here the admin, the enable password secret of Cisco on all the routers. If I run this command show run to include user, as you can see I configured the admin one as a user and the secret password is admin one. All of this is admin one. So now also I can ping from PCA, PCC here and PCB because I ran already the dynamic protocol rep version 2 ping 192.168.3.3. This is PCC, and also I can ping PCB ping 192.168.2.3, and also PCB can ping both PCs here. I'll ping PCA of 192.168.1.2. Okay. Now on router 1, the whole idea of this video is what are the uses for AAA authentication and to have the TechHack server or radio server on networks. That in this case here in this video we will have local users on the routers, and also we'll configure on the TechHack server, do configuration for AAA authentication on the router and here on the server TechHack or radius, that you can have the user configure it on the server, and this server will be able to log into the network device to centralize the authentication. Just like in this case here, we have 5 networks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 networks. Here we have on router 2 just this PC with the switch and the server. Maybe let's assume in this side of the network we have 100 servers. You cannot go to each individual, 100 routers. You cannot go into each individual network device and configure a username and a password for a user. All what you need, you can centralize it on the TACAC server, and from there the user will be able to uh, uh, log in to the network device. Here now we will start with router 1. I'll configure local AAA authentication for console access on the router. This is by enabling the AAA on the router and configuring AAA authentication for console login to use the local database. Here on the router, configure terminal. The first thing we need to do is to enable AAA new model. Now a AAA authentication for login, we will use the default. What does this mean? Now we are using AAA authentication for login. The default, what is the default in this case? It's the local configuration we configured on the router. Next, I will configure the line console to use the defined AAA authentication method by enabling AAA on router 1 and configure AAA authentication for console login to use the default method list. Back on router 1, line console 0. Here, for login, we have either authentication to use there or local. Here we configured or enabled AAA, so it is authentication and what to use the default. Now I will verify on router 1 that AAA authentication is configured correctly, and that just here what we'll do, exit, and another exit. Here the username, as we said, it is admin1, and the password of admin1. Enable the exec login is the secret Cisco. Now I will configure a named list AAA authentication method for VTY lines on router 1. I will configure a named list called telnet to authenticate logins using local AAA. Now back on router 1. Configure terminal, AAA authentication, login, and I name it telnet, and this is for local. Now for the line VTY, 5 lines from 0 to 4, login authentication telnet. Now I'll verify the AAA authentication method by verifying that the telnet configuration from the command prompt on PCA can telnet. So start the command with telnet for 192.168.1.1. The username is admin1 and the secret password is admin1, and enable password of Cisco. So now we are done with the. Now on router 2, I will configure server-based AAA authentication using TACACS. Router 2 first. I will configure a backup local database entry called admin2, and with the secret password is admin2. This is only for backup purposes. As a backup, just if the user is trying to connect using the TACAC server, or the TACAC server is unavailable for some reason. It went down or it got disconnected. So the user will be able to log in locally using these credentials. Enable, as I said, the enable password of Cisco on the routers. Now configure terminal, username admin2, secret admin2. This is only for backup purposes. Now on router 2, now let me go to the TACAC server here and check the configuration done on the server. As you can see here, we have the client as router 2. The IP address here is this interface of 192.168.2.1 and the secret of TACACS, and the server type is TACACS on server, the TACACS server here. Now on the router 2, I will configure the TACACS server specifics. Now TACACS server, the host which is hosting the TACACS server is this server of 192.168.2.2, and the TACACS key, as we specified it here on the server, the key is TACACS. So back to the server is TACACS. Now I will configure AAA login authentication for console access on router 2. Now I'll enable AAA on the router and configure all logins to authenticate using the AAA TACACS server, and if not available, then use the local server. Back to router 2. Here a AAA, a new model, AAA authentication, login, default, group, TACACS, and local. Enter. Here, what does this mean? Here we are using a AAA authentication for login, and the default is first using TACACS, the configuration what we used, and if it's not available, then you can log in using local on the router to do your work. Now I will configure the line console to use the defined AAA authentication method for console login. Now for the line console 0 for login authentication, use the default. I will verify by logging out, then log back in on router 2. So on on router exit here, exit, and another exit. So the username is admin2, password is admin2. Now it did not allow us to log into the router. Why? Because I tried to use the local configuration to log into the user, but if we go back to the server, it is user2 as the username and the password of user2. This is just to for locally use admin2 with secret password of admin2, but using the TACACS server, which is connected and we did the configuration, it must be using user2 as the username and the password as user2. And now we are in business. Now, I hope this was so clear. For local on the router, we have the user as admin2 and secret password as admin2. But using the authentication or AAA authentication using the TACAC server, as it's configured here as user2 and the password as user2. But just in case that this server was down or got disconnected or got corrupted for some reason, that the user still can log into the uh, router using the local username and password. Now on router 3, I will also, we have the enable secret of Cisco, but I still did not configure a local user or password. I'll type show run pipe to include user. Still, I did not configure a user locally. So configure terminal user name admin 3. This is for local. Secret as admin 3. These are for just as a backup purposes, configuring the local and the local username and password. Now on the Radius server here, we have locally on the router we have admin3 and the secret password as admin3 to log in. But on using the Radius server, I configure it as user3 and as the username and user3 as a password to log in to the router using a AAA authentication on using the Radius server. We configured the local user with the password here on the router just for a backup purposes, just in case the Radius server was not available for any reason. Now, now on the router, I will configure AAA Radius server IP address and the secret key on router 3. So on the router, Radius host the Radius server, which is it is hosted where it is hosted on this server with the IP address of 192.168.3.2, and the Radius server key. If you go back to the Radius server, as you can see, the key we use here is Radius. Now on router 3, I will enable a AAA and configure all logins to authenticate using the AAA Radius server, and if not available, then use a local database. So back to router 3. First, we need to configure this AAA new model. Now AAA authentication for login. The default is group Radius. If it's not available, then you can log in using the local configuration. This is what this means. We are using AAA authentication for logging in. The default is using the group Radius. Maybe you can have up to 4 defaults. If the group Radius is not available, maybe also you can configure TACAC server, and if nothing is available, you can use your local configuration to log in into the server. Now I will configure a AAA authentication for console login to use the default AAA authentication method. Now stay on the server, type in line console 0 login authentication default. Now I'll verify that the configuration we did on this server, it is working properly. So I will exit, and another exit. So now we configured the AAA authentication on the router. So the local user on router 3 is admin 3, and we configured that the secret password is admin 3. And still looking and still checking, and it did not, it's telling us login invalid because we put the first option to log in using the group of radius. And here, as you can see, to log into the router, we must use the username as user3 with the password as user3. So go back to the server, type in user3, and with the password user3, 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 user3. But did I configure it here? User3, user3, and the password of user3. User, is it a bug on? It's not. I'll go on user invalid admin 3, admin 3, no invalid login, user 3. Is it a bug on the server? Let me do it. Remove it and configure the username as user3 with the password of user3, and okay. So now let's see. This is correct. Radius, radius. No, this is the wrong here. Remove. Client name is router 3. The client IP address of 192.168.3.1. Secret is radius, not 2i, just 1i. Add. They must have the same keyword. Username is user3, and okay. So let's get back here. User3, radius, radius. Okay. Admin 3.